Hello crafty friends, this is Laura. Thank you for joining me for my 10 cards 1 kit video. This is featuring the Love from Lizi May 2018 card kit. Let's jump right in with card 1. So here I have one of the green card bases. I actually took all of the coloured cardstock that was included in the kit and I cut it in half and folded it in half to make standard A2 size note cards. And then I took one of the patterned pieces of paper here and cut out this small heart, and I just kind of placed that over the top and traced the inside of that heart cutout so I could figure out exactly where I'd need to do my stamping. I used one of the sentiments from the kit and my Versamark sticky ink, and then the beautiful gold embossing powder that's included. This gold embossing powder has got such beautiful shine. You'll see it here on this sentiment, but you'll see it even more in some of my later cards. I just buffed away any of the excess of my anti-static powder tool, just using that cloth there, and then I'm erasing those pencil lines. Here I'm stamping down again with my Versamark ink, and I'm going to use that same embossing powder this time on the banana leaf stamp, and I'm just sprinkling that on top. You can see I'm being really generous, and I just tapped that onto a scratch piece of paper, and you can see I didn't use my anti-static powder tool, so I've got a small amount of embossing powder where I didn't want it, but that won't cause a problem because I'm going to cut this out anyway. Once I've funneled all the excess back into the pot, I'll go ahead and use my heat gun to set that, and the shine is just really pretty. It's such a nice gold colour, you can see it, the light kind of bouncing off it there. So now I've got the stencil, I went ahead and lined it up over the top of this. These stencils are great, they coordinate perfectly with the large stamp images, and I'm just using a small finger dauber to apply some distress ink. Once I'm finished with that, I'll just go ahead and use a baby wipe to clean off my stencil, and then just fussy cut out that leaf. I wanted to make sure that this card had lots of interest, so I decided to use my foam tape to pop up the panel that I created earlier, and I just covered the back of that completely in my foam tape, peeled off the adhesive backing, and then stuck that down, making sure to line up my stamping with that heart piece. And for some reason, I don't really know why, but I find it easier to do this when the card's horizontal, so you'll see me do that a lot. I'll turn my cards horizontal when I'm trying to line things up. So I'm just using my Tombow Mono Multi Glue here, and I'm applying that only in the very centre of this leaf, and that's because I want the edges to kind of curl up a little bit and to have just a bit more movement on this piece. So I stuck that down on the left hand side. And I decided that would be it for the outside of this card, but I did want to decorate a piece for the inside as well, so I took some of the thinner white cardstock that was included in the kit, and I cut that down to be layering pieces for inside some of my cards, and then I'm just taking that same stamp that I gold embossed on the outside, and using the green distress ink again, just to kind of stamp that down in the corner, so it provides a mirror image of what's on the outside, and then I just use one of those gold peel-offs to apply some shine to the top of this. I'm using my ATG gun. It's one of my favourite ways to stick things down. You'll see me using it an awful lot, and I'm really pleased that Lizi has the refills for this in her shop now. So I'll open up my card. My cards are all top folding cards, and again you'll see me turn it to the side just to try and line everything up, because this is slightly smaller as I want some of that green cardstock to poke out of the outside. Here's a closer look at card 1, and moving on to card 2. For this one I'm taking that same distress ink that I was using just a minute ago, and I'm actually colouring the wooden banner piece. I did get my fingers nice and inky in the process as I was doing this, because distress ink will take a little while to dry. You can go ahead and heat set it, but I didn't mind getting inky, so you'll see my fingers change colour throughout this video. They're currently green. I now have the yellow card base and another piece of the pattern paper that I've cut down to size. I think this pattern is beautiful, and this colour theme here is actually the theme for the Love from Lizi channel blog, challenge blog this month. This is a new thing that is offered on the Love from Lizi blog, and you can access that blog by heading over to the website or checking the links in the description below. And it's actually a colour challenge this month, so all you have to do to enter the challenge and be in with a chance of winning a £20 voucher for the Love from Lizi store is make a card that uses red, yellow and green. As you can see with this kit, it's really not going to be difficult to use those colours. If you do, then go ahead and click on the link in the description below and you can add your card submission to that challenge. So whilst I was going through those details, I cut out the Toucan using the Toucan die from the kit. I think it's a really beautiful die, and I've already seen some really great use of it by the different design team members. I think it's going to go a long way. I think people will be using that one for quite some time. So I then added some of the leaves to the bottom of my flag, and I'm going to use it almost like a perch for my bird to sit on. I've applied some of those black foam tape onto the back, those foam squares by Scrapbook Adhesive. Love them, they're my new favourite foam tape, or foam squares rather, to use. I'm really pleased with them. So now again I'm going to stamp something on the inside of my card, and I'm just stamping down this border stamp using again some Distress ink. Distress ink isn't necessarily the go-to ink for stamping, it's much better for techniques, but when it's a small stamp like this it will work well, and certainly the Distress oxides are quite good for stamping as well, because they are a hybrid and they've got those pigment qualities. Once again, just because I can't help myself, I'm adding more of those gold peel-offs, and I'm just using those to frame that border stamp there. So I applied one in a straight line across the bottom and then one across the top also, and just snipped off the excess, making sure to leave just a little bit and then folding it onto the back. Again, I've got my ATG tape, and you can see it suddenly got really bright on my desk. The sun must have came out just as I was filming this, which has been an issue that I've had to deal with recently. I'm not complaining, it's nice to see the sunshine for a change here in England, but you will notice that I draw the blinds in a minute and that glare will be gone. Okay, so now for card 3. So for this one I'm using my Versamark, but this time it's the Dazzle. I've had this for quite a while. It's very similar to normal Versamark, but it has a little bit of a shine to it as well. And I actually use that Punchinella as a stencil, and it won't harm it in whatsoever. I still have it left and can use it on a project. I just wiped it clean with a baby wipe. I have here a cut down piece of patterned paper. This one is beautiful. It's got a whole bunch of the hibiscus flowers, and I cut that down into a square to stick at the top of this card. I thought it was just a little bit something different to have that kind of square focal point on this rectangular shaped card, and then to fill in the empty space at the bottom I'm using some of the gold ribbon, and I'm just using my double-sided sticky tape to stick that down to the card, and then I'm going to go ahead and tie a bow here. And luckily for me it didn't take too long to tie this one. I think because of the like metallic shimmer on this ribbon, it kind of holds its shape really well. So I found that it was really easy to tie a ribbon with, which was a nice change for me. So I just stuck that down into the double-sided sticky tape and then trimmed the tails. After I was happy with that, it was time to move on to creating the focal point for this card, and for that I'm using this really awesome Glimmer paste. This is the green sample size. I just quickly showed you there what the full size pots look like, and they are available at the Love from Lizi store, so if you did get one of these samples and you've fallen in love with it, then you know where to get more. And all you do is you want to use a spatula. If you don't have one, you could also use a knife, and you just want to spread this in a similar way to how you'd spread kind of frosting on a cake or anything like that. You want to apply it enough that you can make it nice and even through your stencil, and I just masked off any of those extra open areas, and then just pull that up and make sure to clean both your stencil and your spatula really well before all of this dries. I did leave that to dry, and then I trimmed it out into a small square, added some foam squares onto the back, and then I've got another piece of the gold specialty cardstock that I've trimmed down to be a slightly larger square, just to add a nice interesting mat to this piece. You may have noticed just as I held this tile up into the light, there is just a little bit of warping on that piece that I've got my stenciling on, and I think that's just down to the fact that there is so much moisture in that paste. I think if I'd have used my foam tape to create a really even layer behind this piece, or glued it down flat, I wouldn't have had an issue, but because of the gaps between those squares, it did allow the paper to kind of sink down a little bit and create that slight warping. But all in all, I think there's so much shine going on this card, I don't think anyone's really going to notice, and it is handmade anyway, so we kind of expect these little differences that you don't get with Hallmark. So now I'm just going around that square piece with my peel-offs, because I just can't seem to layer two pieces of paper together without adding peel-offs, and I think that gold shine works really well with the rest of the card. I'm just trimming those corners, I'm just mitering them with my craft knife to create really perfect edges. Okay, moving on to card 4. So here I've got a piece of my cardstock in my Misty, and I'm just applying some anti-static powder tool all over the front of the card. I've got the top section masked off there with some painter's tape, and I'm just using this large hibiscus flower and stamping all over my card base. I'm moving the stamp after double stamping with VersaFine, which is why you can't see too much there, but you'll see all of my stamping come to life when I pour the embossing powder over the top. So I skipped through the heat embossing, and look at the shine, it is so beautiful. I did have a little bit extra there embossing powder where I didn't want it, and I just used my sand eraser to get rid of that. I went ahead and cut a heart out of some vellum that I had in my stash, and then I stamped and heat embossed the For You sentiment from the stamp set in the kit onto some black cardstock, and I'm just trimming some banner ends onto the end of it, and then I'll just go ahead and trim it down so it's a little bit smaller, and apply again some more of those Scrapbook adhesive black foam squares onto the back. And then what I'll do is, once I've peeled off the backings and placed that down onto the top of the heart, because vellum can be a little bit tricky to stick down, I want to make sure that I can hide my adhesive. So first of all, I'm going to hide some adhesive behind this black banner, and I'm just using some glossy accents here, which is a really strong adhesive. It can be used as almost like a Nouveau drop on its own, but I'm using it as an adhesive here. And then I'm applying some small drops around the heart, and once I've got this stuck down, I'll go in on the opposite side. I hope I'm not losing you, I hope this makes sense, but you'll see it here once I've got it stuck down and I can see exactly where those little bits of glue are. I'm just going to go ahead and cover that up with some of my Nouveau drops. So there I'm adding those Nouveau drops, and they are the most beautiful colour this month. They're the Strawberry Coulis, and they are the jewel drops, so they dry slightly translucent and with just a hint of colour. So I decided I wanted a little bit more definition. So again, I'm just taking a finger dauber and I'm using my Distress ink in Spun Sugar, and I'm just going around the edges of the card, and it really makes everything kind of pop because this is just mostly just the white and the gold with that black and white sentiment. I just wanted a little bit of extra colour to tie in the Nouveau jewel drops, and I'm just using my Distress ink to do that. So I did go around the vellum heart as well, and I think that really helps to kind of lift it off that background piece and really make it stand out. Okay, so moving on to card number 5. For this one, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wasn't too sure if it was going to work, and I kind of changed my mind as I was going through this, and all in all, I don't think it's the best shaker card idea, but I went with it, and we can see what you think. You can let me know if you think it was successful or if you think it would have been better with just a die cut toucan on the front. So I wanted to make a shaped shaker, and I used my toucan die and then started to create my shaker well, and then I wanted to add in some of the sequins. First I'm going to cover the back of the card in double-sided foam tape and peel off the backing, and then I'm going to bring in the sequins, and I poured the sequin mix into these little kind of triangle shaped tubs, and I just pulled out any of the red because I didn't want those red sequins in this particular colour design. There was a couple of stray sequins trying to escape there, so I just popped those back where I wanted them, and then I've got this really soft grey coloured card base, and I'm just trying to line that up as best I can using the grid lines on my mat, and then I turn that over and I think it makes a really nice shaker card. I was looking at this and I was trying to decide if you could really tell that it was a toucan, and well, you'll see what I did here in just a minute. So next I'm going to take this ribbon, and I'm applying my ATG along the back of it, and then just laying that down just to give the toucan some kind of grounding just underneath its feet, so he's not kind of floating in the middle of nowhere on this card. I used my scissors to just push in the edges of this ribbon. As always, I didn't have an exact card design in mind, so I trimmed this down as best I could, nice and close, and then just tucked in the edges underneath the foam tape. So I decided you couldn't really see the toucan enough, so I did go ahead and die cut another one, and then I stuck that over the top. So it does hide most of this shaker area, but you can still see the sequins moving around in those open areas. So all in all, I think it still works as a shaker card, but definitely kind of progressed from what I was starting with. I used my acrylic block just to hold that in place while it dried. And then in the end, I did also add a hello die cut, just using a die from my stash. Okay, so card 6. I wanted this to be a monochromatic card with some colouring that was in a kind of a, I believe it's called like a highlight colouring, where you section off an area that you're going to have colouring in and everything else stays monochromatic. So I'm just twisting and turning my stamp, working kind of from one corner up until the opposite corner, and just filling in any of those gaps, just until I've got a really nice background piece. I made sure that some of the stamping hangs off the edges as well, just to give it a more kind of natural look. I then was looking for something circular to draw around, and I happened to have this hand cream on my desk, so that was what I used. And I used a pencil to trace that circle outline, and then what I'm going to do is actually just keep my colouring inside that circle. So you'll see what I mean as I go through here. I do have this heavily sped up. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just applying some colour starting from the centre of these flowers and then working out towards the outside. You can see at the edges of my circle, I'm stopping my colouring along those circle lines, which just creates this kind of circle highlight piece in the middle, and I think it's a really nice effect. Once I was finished with my colouring, I just erased any of those pencil lines, and then I was ready to trim this down and add it to my card. I had used some temporary adhesive on the back here to keep this from moving around too much, so that's just what I was rubbing away on the back of this. I trimmed this down to be slightly smaller because I wanted some of the matting to show through. I decided to use a black mat on the background of this. And again, I'm just using my ATG to stick that down. Once I had this layered up on the black mat, I could then go ahead and add it to my white card base, which was made using the thicker cardstock included in the kit. I liked the way there was two different weights of the white cardstock, one for your base and one for your layers. I think that's a really nice thing to do to add some dimension, and if you add a coloured mat behind it, I think it really makes everything pop. So after this was complete, I wanted to make a layered sentiment. Is that what I want to say? No, a stacked sentiment. So I again took that hello die and I die cut it several times from white cardstock and once from black cardstock, just using my mini die cut machine. It's much easier to use this on my desk than to lift my giant Big Shot. So I do keep this one on my desk to hand for smaller die cuts like this. And then I'm just using my quickie glue pen all over the top of this piece to stick the hello on top. And then I just layered up the white pieces and stuck that down. So I've actually got, I think, 3 of the white piece and then the black piece on top, which adds some really nice dimension. And then I can stick that down right across the centre of my highlight colouring. Okay, so moving on to card 7. For this one, I'm using 2 of the smaller pieces of the paper. I trimmed these down and then applied some adhesive to one of them and layered the other one on top. And I actually really like how this card turned out. It's a really simple card, really quick and easy to make, and I think it's actually one of my favourites. I decided to use this ribbon here that I used earlier, but actually to use the back of it. You'll see that on the back it's just the plain green colour, and I thought that worked really well for this piece here. So I laid that down across the join, as you so often see me do with my peel-offs. This time I decided to use ribbon. I laid that down over the join and folded the edges away. And then I'm actually taking this heart die cut from the first card. You can see that it's made from the same patterned paper as my top piece, and that's just my leftovers from card number 1. I again used this hello die. I felt like this really big bold sentiments worked well with some of these papers. I did use all of the sentiments, I believe, from the stamp set, but I also wanted to make some generic hello cards as well. I again used my glossy accents as a glue here, and to be perfectly honest, that's because my multimedia mat went missing, so I was reaching for what was closest, and your glossy accents will work really well as a strong adhesive. I then took this whole entire piece and used my ATG and stuck that down onto one of the dark green card bases. And I think it just looks lovely. I think that pop of green just looks perfect with the rest of this piece. As I say, it's a really quick and easy card to make, but I think it is actually my favourite from this 10. You'll have to let me know in the comment section below which one is your favourite. So here we have card 8, and I've got this beautiful background stamp from Hero Arts. This was a recommended coordinating add-on for the kit, and I decided to have this added to my box, which if you are a kit subscriber, you can add as much product as you want from the store into your box, and as long as you order it before the 25th of the month, it will be included in the next month's kit, which is just perfect. So you can shop till your heart's content, and you know that those items are going to arrive with your kit subscription. And there is no extra postage for that. So I stamped that down a couple of times. I used my Misty to make sure I could do some double stamping. If you don't have a stamping tool such as the Misty, that's fine. You can just go ahead and lay your background stamp with the red rubber face up, ink it up, and then lay your paper over the top, and that will work just as well. Once I was happy with my stamping, I just edged around this with my ink cube just to add a bit of depth to this piece. I trimmed it down and stuck it on top of one of the grey card bases. As tends to be my style, once I had everything stuck down, I decided I wanted to add some ribbon, so I had to stick it over the top and then tuck the edges away, but it's no problem, you can always do that. And I stuck down this brown thin piece of ribbon here, and just tucked those edges away, and I decided to use some more of my Toucan die cuts. And this time I decided to do something a little bit different. So I have one here which is just kind of the regular Toucan, and I'm actually going to use one flipped the wrong way. So I've cut it out of this green cardstock and also some white cardstock because I wanted to add a little bit of dimension, and I'm sticking the two of them together. All you need to do for this technique, super easy. Die cut either out of the wrong side of the paper or using a paper that's the same on both sides and turn your die cut round. Really easy to get a mirror image of your die cut, and I think these two toucans look just beautiful together. And the sentiment Wild About You I felt worked perfectly, so I again just used some black cardstock from my stash, stamped and white heat embossed, and then used some of those black foam squares to pop it up. Again, another quick and easy card to put together, and I think that background stamp is just beautiful. I decided to make use of the background for the inside of the card, and I just stamped the background pattern just on a section of this white piece, and of course you know I'm going to add a peel off just to edge that piece there, and I think it just looks beautiful with the stamping and then that gold peel off. Once I've got those edges tucked away, I'll stick the whole thing down. After getting rid of my inky fingerprints with my sand eraser, I'll stick the whole thing down with my tape gun, and that's it for this card. So moving on from this one, you will notice, or you may notice, that one of my fingernails breaks quite significantly. So if you're wondering why my left index finger is so small on each of these videos, it's several days later and my nail had snapped, so I felt quite sorry for myself. Here I've stamped the large hibiscus flower again a few times. I actually only end up using one of these, but I'm sure the other ones will make it into another project at some point. And I'm going to be doing some heat embossing using vellum. It can be a little bit tricky to heat emboss on vellum, but what you want to do is make sure your heat gun is really, really good and hot, and then just take it to your vellum for just a couple of seconds at a time. You can see here I'm kind of jumping. I was pressing it near to the card and then taking it away. Here I've got a finger dauber and some of my distress ink. This is mustard seed, and I'm colouring on the back side of the vellum. And I think this is a really nice way to add some colour to your vellum. You'll see how beautiful it is in just a minute. I used my mustard seed and abandoned coral to create some colour on this piece. Once I was happy with how that looked, I cut everything out. And then here I have, isn't this pearl cardstock so beautiful? You'll see here my fingers have turned kind of red, that's just because I was handling those coloured pieces before they'd fully dried. So I've stuck down the pearlized, I keep wanting to say pearl, that's not right, pearlized cardstock on the back here, and then I actually created a square piece using the back of that same patterned paper. So this is that same parrot, no, not parrot. Is he a parrot? Is he a toucan? I can't see on my computer screen. I think he's a parrot. I'm going to go with parrot. Okay, so this same pearlized piece, I stuck down the back of it because it's got just a nice white pearlized colour to it. That's what I'm trying to say. Oh, so then I went around this piece with my gold peel-offs once again. And you can see my cut out flowers just on the side there. I decided just to use the one and I ran it through my Xyron machine. And then I'm just going to peel it up. You can see I had a bit of trouble getting it off the backing. It didn't want to move away. Maybe that's because I didn't burnish it beforehand, but you can see it stuck the flower down just beautifully. And once it's stuck down to that white background, you can really see those colours. So in the kit there were also these teeny tiny gold leaves, and I thought they would just create the perfect little interesting element on the background of this piece here, and I'm just using some glue dots to stick those down. I decided to add an inside piece to this card as well, so a white area where I could write my message. And for this I just masked off just one of the flowers from this border stamp and just stamped that down in the bottom corner, and I think it just coordinates perfectly with the hibiscus flower that's on the front, and I just think it's something really sweet, really easy, just to add a little bit of something extra to the inside of this card. Once that was stuck down in place, that is that card finished. So for card 10, I did something a little bit different. So you may be able to recognise here, this is a, or at least it will be, a corset. And once I saw that, I want to say it's called Marabou, the Marabou fluff that was included in the kit, it just reminded me of a corset and the kind of fluffy trim that may be included. So I went onto Pinterest and I found this corset card printable, and I printed it out and I cut that out of my white cardstock and used it to create my card base from some black cardstock. So I traced around that with a white gel pen. Possibly not the best thing to use, I really should have used a pencil, but I did actually manage to erase those lines quite well anywhere where it was left behind. So once I'd cut that out with my craft knife, I went ahead and created my score lines, and then you can just see here I'm lining up my crocodile with the holes where I'm going to have the eyelets and just punching some holes through. I've got this really fast sped up, so apologies if you're getting kind of dizzy watching this, but all I was doing was cutting and punching. Once that was finished, I added these gold eyelets and then used my crocodile to set them. You'll see here that I'm actually using both hands to do this. This is because I have very little strength in my right hand, so I have to use both my right and left hand to be able to set those eyelets. I printed out the printable on a slightly smaller scale, and this was so I could have a white mat to write my message on the inside, and instead of having to square that off, I decided it'd be fun to have that be the same shape. I really like how this card turned out. I think it's a fun kind of silly card. It'd maybe be good for, I don't know, like a bridal shower or a hen party, I don't know. So for some reason, I think I was so engrossed with my peel-offs, I didn't realise that my camera had died, but all of those gold lines which mimic kind of the boning that you would get in a corset, that's all they're added with, it's just my peel-offs. I just gently worked with them and curled them round to the design that I wanted, and then I'm just lacing up this corset with some ribbon. Once she was all laced up and good to go, I just finished it off with a bow, and you can see I had a little bit more trouble with this bow, and but it didn't take me too long, it took 2 goes, so that's a win for me for bow tying. So I tied that bow, trimmed off the edges, and then just tightened it up. And then I had to bring in this fluff. This was the entire inspiration for this card. Again, I'm using my glossy accents as my glue. And I'm just allowing that to kind of sit on the outside front of the card, and then I'm just going to lay this marabou fluff on top, and I've just got some pins here that I'm going to use to kind of help hold everything in place until it dried. So I worked with this piece actually as one long piece here, and then once I was happy with it, once it had dried, I went ahead and cut down the centre. And when I did that, I actually got a flurry of these fluffy pieces kind of float across my desk, so perhaps it would have been better to cut this before I stuck it down, but either way it's worked just fine, and then I was able to remove those pins and I've got my beautiful fluffy corset. Thank you so much for joining me for this 10 cards 1 kit video. If you want to see close-up shots of each of the cards, you can head over to my Instagram or to my blog. On screen right now there's a couple more videos that I think you might enjoy, so if you haven't already seen them, go ahead and click on the thumbnails, and if you're not already subscribed to this channel, you can do so by clicking on the logo that's on screen right now. That's going to be all from me today. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.